That's 6. Good evening and welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for November 6th, 2017. Could we have the roll, please?
Tyler Robinson.
Here.
John Spring.
Here.
Danielle Bailey.
Here.
Mitzi Barker. Here. Greg Strike.
Here.
Brian Looney.
Here.
Andre Spinelli has been excused. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two sets of minutes, October 2nd and October 9th. Can I have a motion to approve?
Could I make a correction for the number for October 2nd?
Okay, let me get a second to the motion to approve first.
Second. I don't see any way to do that.
Seconded by Mr. Looney. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Spring, go ahead.
Yeah, just a minor correction. On page 4 of the October 2nd, just to clarify, it says towards the middle bottom, it says in the 2012 residential market study showed that there was a surplus of land. And I'd just like to clarify that surplus of large lot residential land. It's not a big deal, but
Any objection to that comment? I see none. Are there any other comments, questions related to the minutes? Any objection to adopting the minutes? Hearing none, those minutes are adopted. Disclosures, Danielle.
None.
Brian?
Yes, so in consent agenda, item A, 1A, I have a conflict of interest there.
Say that again.
I have,
This was the case that you had your company's involved in,
I was not personally aware of the project, but my company is involved with that case.
so you're abstaining from voting on the
That's
other
true.
resolution. Thank you. Mr. Strike? John?
none.
Mitzi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was absent for the meeting on October the 2nd. However, I did go back to the record of the meeting and listen to the entire case item and testimony on case number 2017-0105, and am prepared to be able to vote on the associated resolution.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Barker, for that comment and for doing that work. And I have no disclosures. So next up is the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Thank you, Ms. Barker, seconded by Mr. Strike. Aside from the abstentions, are there any issues or anyone wishing to pull any items on the consent agenda? Any objection to passing the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. Before we get into the case related to the R3A zoning district, the other two cases that were to be public hearings this evening are to be postponed, so I would entertain a motion to postpone the first to December 4th and the second to 11/13. Mr. Strike, you can probably handle them both at once if you want to. So motion to approve Sears and Roebuck to December 4th, motion, or rather the Nordstrom Rack, and motion to postpone the accessory dwelling unit ordinance to next week's meeting, 11/13. Is that correct, staff? Those are the do I have the dates correct? Okay, so thank you. That's seconded by Ms. Barker. Any objection to those postponements?
Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
The petitioner on that is the Sears Roebuck Company, not the Nordstrom Rack.
Thank you. Case 2017-124. Thank you. Any objection to those postponements? Hearing none, those two cases are postponed, which brings us to the unfinished business from last month's meeting. This is case 2017-110, essentially a new zoning ordinance to create an R3A zoning district. The public hearing is still open, and we will get to the public hearing in a moment, but before we do so, I'll read the procedure by which the public may speak. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission Rules of Procedure. Petitioners, including his or her representatives, 10 minutes. Representatives of groups such as community councils, 5 minutes. And individuals, 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the Commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the Commission. An individual may have appeal rights related to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes except Commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Our action here tonight is a recommendation to the Assembly. So with that, unless commissioners feel differently, I would ask for the revised memorandum, a quick update from staff for the memo that they presented, and then I propose that we open the public hearing for continued testimony, but if there are questions of staff up front, we can take those either now or after the public hearing. So with that, you're up, John, I think.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So John Sus with staff. So there's a couple pieces of information that I want to explain to you, and also for the purposes of the member of the public. But to begin with, at the October 9th public hearing, the commissioners asked staff to respond to series of 8 questions. And so the document E1 is the staff memorandum that provides you with responses to each of your questions. We believe that staff have provided you with an inclusive and hopefully self-explanatory response to your questions. We're happy to talk about them tonight, and we are prepared to walk through them. Just as a point of clarification on issue number 6, which you will find on page 11 of 15, under the recommendations, item 1, a small IV, that's the new addition to the language. Everything below that is just, it should not have been underlined. That was my mistake, and I apologize. But it just, the numbering follows from that. So with the insertion of IV, new language, and then the numbering. So ignore the underlined below that for the remaining pieces. So that was just a clarification on that. I would also like to bring to your attention the supplementary packet E1, and let me just go through those briefly for you, and also for the members of the public that may have a copy of this. So the first enclosure is a shadow diagram that staff has put together to help further clarify that particular issue that was contained in the staff memo. And Tom Davis, Mr. Davis, is prepared to help explain and walk through that diagram. Then also the next 2 pages where it says summary of issue items and recommended changes to the R3A residential mixed-use ordinance. Essentially, this is a punch list of the 8 items as well as the 3 recommended items from the October 9th staff report. And we've tried to summarize each of those as best we can, and then there's space for whatever recommendations the Planning and Zoning Commission is prepared to make tonight. But we wanted to try and help you work through these as if that's helpful or not. So the next item is the map, the potential R3A locations. It's 11 by 17, and that provides you with a visual identification of these proposed locations of the R3A. The only change to this map from what you've seen before is some addition of street names, and that was done at the request of Barbara Curl, who had looked at the map, I think, online, she had a hard time finding where things were. So I think that was a good suggestion on Barbara's part, actually. So we've attempted to put some major street names in to help people identify these locations as a way to maneuver. So that concludes all of the additional items in the supplementary packet. So the only other item that I would like to bring to your attention is Commissioner Spring had asked staff to go back to the Federation of Community Councils, provide another offer for staff to meet with any interested community councils. So I did attend their October 18th meeting. I made a very short presentation. I made an offer to meet with, any community council that wanted to at their location, if so. That invitation was distributed to all of the community councils, and we did not receive any responses. Well, maybe that's one right now that Tom's got. But other than that, it's probably his wife. But other than that, we did not receive any responses. And at the meeting itself, got no questions. So felt fairly good about that. You might just, again, for the record, we did introduce this, put this information out in July. So it has been around for a while on the Muni webpage, Planning Department webpage. And we have, that was the second FCC meeting that staff and I attended. So with that, I'll close and see how you wish to proceed. Thank you.
Any questions on staff, either on this memo or the ordinance generally? Mr. Spring.
Thank you. The Chair, it looks like from your memo that one of the issues we had was to try to expand the area that this might apply for, or to, the R3A, and maybe consider lower building height and for purposes of expanding it. So, what, and you agreed that you would put that on your work plan, I think, right? Any idea what the timeline might be for something like that?
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, I don't have a good sense of that, where that would fit in the work plan for right now, but obviously that would be a follow-up question probably for the planning director. But I don't know if, Hal's here, so I don't know. Hal, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. Go ahead and, I was just pulling up the agenda online, so go ahead and ask the question, the specific question, Mr. Spring, again.
Sure. Yeah, one of the questions we had, I think it was one of my questions actually, that it would be, it seems like this is pretty restrictive as far as the applicability of the R3A, the locational criteria, that to make it really useful, it would be nice to expand it to other parts of the city.
Right.
And I think I suggested maybe not to limit it to 5 stories instead of 7 stories, because I think 7 stories there's a good reason to restrict 7-story R3A. And the response was that staff would put it on their work plan but it's unclear to me. I'm just curious if you could tell us what the schedule might be for something like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We are preparing a work program, and I was hoping to distribute it, but it'll be it'll still be at least till the end of tomorrow before you see anything coming out from our team based on both the work program and the Land Use 2040 stuff and all the other things that we're doing by division. We have received a lot of requests, including from the Star neighborhood and other neighborhoods, to extend this, incorporate this into their neighborhood along Fireweed, as an example. And so those requests are coming in right now. I would just say that this is as Tom said earlier in a presentation to our transportation team today, this is a work in progress, and that we will continue to work on it. But if we're hearing from a lot of other locations that we want to expand R3A to other locations, then I think we would definitely consider moving that up in the priority process for sure. So at this point, again, it's part of an overall work program to implement. We are focusing in on some areas that are more ready to go. But if other communities or neighborhoods are very interested in it, we're certainly listening to them.
One follow-up, please. Is it still the responsibility of the Planning Commission to review the work plan of the planning?
The request has come in, and I believe that you should do that.
It seems like that was part of our responsibilities, isn't it? Or is that in the
Yep.
Title 21? And I don't think we do that, have done that for a while, have we?
No, that's why I've been asking for it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So we could deal with that when we get the work plan done.
Yep.
Absolutely. Great.
Any other questions on the ordinance? I'd like to walk through a couple of recommendations, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of quickly, just so I'm making sure that I have an understanding of what's being proposed. Number one, buildings taller than 40 feet shall not cast shadows. So again, does the shadowing pertain to anything that's 40 feet or less?
No.
And what is a neighborhood use park as opposed to another park? This is a list presumably somewhere?
The Parks Plan categorizes all parks that are dedicated into neighborhood use, special use, community use. As the list, we have also mapped them as part of the Land Use Plan Map project, and they are also mapped in the Parks Plan.
Could you just give me an example, Tom, of a couple? Theed maybe?
Theed will.
Yeah.
Lynn Airy Park would be a neighborhood
Okay.
park.
So the ones that I would assume would be embedded in the neighborhoods, those sorts of parks.
Embedded in the neighborhoods and usually less than 10 acres, sometimes a little more.
Great. The 21,000 square feet, thank you for your consideration of a smaller site for rezoning, or in fact, just clarification. Your explanation talks about how 21,000 would allow 3 lots that are zoned R5 in the Abbott Town Center to rezone. I'm just curious, a lot of lots around, some are 7,000 square feet, but some in fact are 6,750 or 6,250, so it's maybe more typical in some of our neighborhoods to then require 4 lots. It's fine, I just want to know that we've sort of contemplated that. A lot on an alley typically would be less than 7,000 square feet other than downtown.
Most of the areas that are mapped to become R3A in the residential zones are basically these R5 areas. There are commercial areas with small lot patterns, along Spenard Road that might be R3A. Those would be like right along Spenard Road or what have you. Those we consider less likely for the property owner to choose R3A, but it's still available. It's calibrated for those R5 areas. If there's an interest in making it possible to do typical 7,000 square foot lots, groups of 3, to be able to rezone to this, and maybe one of the lots is 6,800 square feet, or whatever. We could, modify this as we did in the B1A to just make that minimum rezone size just a bit less than the 21,000 and give that safety room, I guess. We could look into it and figure out a number tonight if you wish to provide that safety valve.
Okay, thanks. I think where I'm at is the height beyond. So there's a provision to get up to 50 feet from 40 feet, which would accommodate the 4 stories. Would that 10 feet above 40 have to be set back from the top of the building?
No, it would not. The building could be without any step back in its form.
So when does the step back doesn't automatically come into play? It just comes into play in certain situations.
I think you're referring to that replacement of that 30-foot upper floor setback with a more I guess, gentle setback for those upper floors. And so for example, above 40 feet above that third floor, so to speak, what's proposed now in the staff report is to not require increasing that setback for that fourth floor all the way back to 30 feet from the right-of-way. It would basically be above 40 feet, kind of mimic some of our existing provisions in other zones. Basically, for every increase in height of 1 foot, there would be an increase in setback of 1 foot from the street. So, if the designer wished that they could step back that floor a little bit, if it's a 12-foot ceiling on the floor, that's 12 feet, it'd be stepped back, in building form 12 feet. Or alternatively, they just move the building back and the building is set back that far, it'd be a total of 22 feet back from the right-of-way. The concept of that creating a gentler street canyon is on page 11 of 15 in our November 6 packet. Just describes what that's trying to do on the right-hand side of the illustration. Again, it doesn't require a step back in form. It could just be a setback for the whole building.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's interesting because first of all, just so you know, and I hope you've learned this from talking to other builders, you'd be very unlikely to set back here. Just given the cost of construction and everything that needs to go into the structure of a building to step that back, you won't do it. You'd lose a whole half of the building, and then you'd be on an upper floor corridor that then is only a single corridor, and so my assumption is one of two things will happen. I understand the intent. I just want you to know what I think. We're trying to get these so that they're as feasible as possible. So you will either pull the whole building back if it's allowed within the zoning district. So you'll basically, I would pull the whole building back if I could, rather than to get my fourth floor. And maybe I make it, maybe I don't, or I go down to 3 stories and I fight over the feasibility of it. So again, I understand the intent, but this is a very significant issue as it relates to constructability and feasibility, and just pointing that out. But thanks for the clarification. Those are the questions that I had. Anyone else have questions before we go to the continuation of the public hearing? Okay, at this point, I'd like to open the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to testify on the proposed R3A zoning district, please come on forward. There's 2 gentlemen up front here, I think, have been waiting to testify all day. We're not signing that thing unless you testify. Anyone wishing to testify?
Good evening. My name is Karen Kasich-Michelson, Michelson & Daughter Construction here in Anchorage. I would like to say that we are for the R3A zoning district as proposed. I've worked for many hours with a lot of those gentlemen sitting over there, going over various issues with Title 21 and R3A and other things that are on the upcoming agendas. And we see it as creating an availability to create more housing in Anchorage, which we need desperately. So at this point, we're in favor and hope that everything goes well. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? Mm-hmm. And I don't think you were testifying on behalf of home builders, right?
I do not have a signed approval from my board that says we support it.
Okay. Can you share, have you had conversations at home builders about the ordinance?
We've had many conversations about several of the ordinances you have coming up, and I've not heard anybody say anything negative, only that they hope that in the future we give as much effort to trying to create more single-family lots to build on. So
this is, clearly mostly not about single-family. I think there's a potential for it. Do you know anybody that's interested or has a potential project that would fit under this ordinance?
I do not personally.
Great. Okay, thanks for coming down.
You bet. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify? Last chance. No, that's it? Okay, hearing none, the public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body? Mr. Spring?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up with a question of the staff, maybe.
Go ahead.
It would raise an issue, I think. Because the last public hearing we had, I think the commission was discussing the desirability of building four-story buildings and the cost efficiency of that kind of structure. And I know in your memo you said that, well, the fourth story is really pretty easy to get because of the criteria for height increases, and it's just a site plan review, so that'll be pretty easy, so not really a big deal about fourth floor. But there's, all throughout the ordinance, though, there's really a lot of different, all the restrictions apply to the fourth story. Almost all of them. You can build anything up to 3 stories, 40 feet, but go up above that to the fourth story to 50 feet. Then you have the shadow starts to apply. And then you've got on page 11 of the memo, you got, let's see, is that page 11? Oh, of the August 15th memo, sorry. You have the neighborhood protections apply, and one of them is like upper story size width limit is 12,000 feet. Suddenly it's a restriction above 3 stories. The 4th story would have to be 12,000 square feet. I don't know if that's a burden or not. You got the climate access, you got the height bulk transition. Isn't that true? That's all applies to pretty much everything above 40 feet, right? So it seems like we should make, if we really think that the 4 stories is going to really be the critical threshold for penciling out projects, that maybe we ought to make it easier for the 4 stories and apply all these standards to anything above 50 feet. So we get, encourage then, the development of 4 stories. I don't personally see that it's that much difference. It's 10 feet, right? But so is that really going to be impact the neighborhood if you allow an extra 10 feet? And maybe apply these standards to everything above 50 feet.
Yes, the neighborhood protections on page 7 of 20 of the ordinance, there's about 6 protections. I think we've recommended adding another one. Really, it's just the 2nd and the 3rd and the 4th that would be really most likely to impact a building that's taller than the 3-story, 40-foot. The others apply to all buildings. The purpose of 2, 3, and 4 are to mitigate the impacts, or in some cases avoid the impacts of a taller building. 4-story building, a 50-foot building is taller than what we've allowed in these areas, in the residential zones before. So it is creating a new, taller type of building in areas that have not had them. Good site planning can adjust for northern climate, the sunlight access protection and 2I. That isn't necessarily a greater cost. Shadowing of your neighbor is going to have the same impact on that neighbor, whether it's 40 feet or, whether it's 50 or 70 feet. We recommend, we're going to allow taller buildings than before, that we provide those protections, and the sites are large enough to allow the building to avoid those impacts. The other 2 are related to height as well. 4I does admittedly get, the impacts get more severe as the building gets taller, from the 4th floor to the 5th floor to the 6th floor. That's where we're looking to have slender floor plates for the taller buildings. We can always, adjust that to make that one higher than 50 feet if you wish, without any, major impact to the objectives. But I would recommend that 2I and 3I apply to the building height increases, whether it's 40 feet, 50 or above. 50 feet or above.
Just a follow-up
Go ahead.
for me. So why 30 feet? Why is 30 feet such a critical height? And what do you expect the existing zoning would be that's going to be changed? Is that, in most of these cases that are on the map, you have identified by the circle which properties? What are those mostly? Are those, what residential zones are they that will be changed?
The largest site in East Anchorage is Rangeview Mobile Home Court. I believe that's an R3 district. We have a couple of R5 districts down near Abbott Town Center. Emerald is R2M, correct? Is it R2M? So these are outlying areas. If they're zoned residential, they're very likely to be R3 or R2M or something less. R3, I think, is our medium density district, allowing up to, what is it currently, 35 feet. 35 feet has been found to be difficult in some cases to fit 3 stories in, and we are looking at exploring that. The 40 feet is designed to be ample to allow for easily 3 stories of all residential, or, given the way we measure height and forgive height for commercial ground floor, easily allow for a 3-story building with 2 stories residential above a ground floor of commercial. So 40 feet, the magic thing about 40 feet is that it's a bit like R3, what R3 allows, and it allows us 3 stories, whether they're residential or commercial. And there's really nothing magical about any number, but that's how we get to 40 feet. And above that, we're beginning to add stories. We're adding stories that we haven't had before in these areas in the residential. We're adding a 4th floor and a 5th. We don't have a 4th floor and a 5th in a medium density zone.
Anyone else? Good. One last question. I think I asked at the last meeting. No, 2 last questions. But the regarding the map and the area in Spenard between Minnesota and Spenard Road that's highlighted, remind me why this is a candidate site since it's Zone B3 already.
Well, the primary, most likely implementation zone for areas like that are the commercial. We do list in the land use plan, the 2040 plan, that R3 is a choice, and it would be, available, and the plan would support it. But admittedly, if B3 is already there,
I can do a 45-foot mixed-use building in B3 as is without the standards, right? I mean, I just was wondering to know if I was going to miss, if I was missing something there.
no, I don't believe so.
Okay. Now, could we get maybe some instruction from staff, because I've got 3 previous packets, a packet here tonight with some recommendation, a motion to adopt needs to reference. Could you just get us all on the same page of what staff's recommendations are, all in? Because I got 2 packets dated August 15th and 1 October 9th, and I just want to make sure we're all looking at the final recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, so the punch list that we've provided you, there's 3 items from October 9th, and then there's 8 from the November 6th staff packet. So unless I'm missing something, I think those are the ones that we're hoping that you'll take action on tonight.
So again, it's the one, because I had 2 dated October 9th, so it's the,
It's item G1.
G1 is the original, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm not going to make this motion, so I just want to make sure one of you guys know what the motion is. That's the table, right? Okay.
Mr.
Yep.
Chair,
Yeah.
would it help if we walk through each of the items and what the recommendations are?
You're looking at the table right now? The table
Well,
and the
I was going to
supplement?
go through the memos, because you can see the verbiage in the memo better than the table.
So it's those three from October 9th, it's the three... Yeah, why don't you make sure I'm on the right page here? That'd be great.
So starting with the October 9th memo entitled G1.
Yep.
So on page 3 of 43 is the first item that has a change. It's entitled Recommended Amendment to Subsection 210402H2H1. And that's the district location requirements. That's rewritten. That's the first item.
Okay.
Second item is directly below it at the bottom of page 3. It's the building placement relative to the street section. And in all of these, remember, all the new language is underlined. The third item on the October 9th memo is on page 4 of 43. It's the Northern Climate Sunlight Access change.
Okay.
So that's the three items from that G1. Then if you go to item E1, which is dated November 6, there's 8 issues there on pages 1 through 15. The first one is issue 1. Following the response, there's 2 recommendations by staff on the bottom of page 2 of 15, but only item 2 actually changes anything. So it's one item there changing. Moving to page 4 of 15, issue number 2. Following the staff response, there's 2 recommendations for change, numbered 1 and number 2. Moving to page 6 and 7 of 15 is issue number 3. And following the staff response, there are 2 recommendations, one of which is a change, and that's number 2. Page 8 of 15 and 9 of 15 is issue number 4. Following the staff response, there are 2 items, recommendations. Only the first is a change in the ordinance. Number 1. Issue number 5 had no changes to the ordinance on page 10. Page 11 and 12 of 15 and 13 of 15 is issue number 6. There's 1 recommendation, and as John pointed out, it's only a change to the first item there in that long list, Roman numeral IV. Excuse me. Page 13, there's a second amendment. So issue number 6 has 2 amendments. Page 14 of 15 is issue number 7. There's 1 minor change in the recommendation section there at the bottom. And issue number 8 deals with the table, and there's a column with 3 changes in it at the bottom of page 15. And that summarizes it.
Great, thanks. Okay, what's the will of the body? Mr. Spring.
I move to recommend approval of the Title 21 code change involving R3A residential mixed-use zoning district with the staff recommendations as contained in the supplemental memo dated November 6th, 2017, including three recommendations that were discussed October 9th and the 8 that were discussed tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Spring. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Before I go to Mr. Strike, does that capture, just as a starting point, all of staff's recommendations in the ordinance? I mean, we didn't go through it the way you did. We went back to the table, but I think we got them all. Is that correct, Mr. Tobish?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Strike?
No, that was the same question I was going to ask the staff.
So we got them all there as staff has recommended. Okay. Mr. Spring, you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think I appreciate the fact that the staff has really jumped on this one. It seemed to be a real priority, the land use plan that we recently adopted, that the Assembly recently adopted, and good first step, I think. The discussion we had last meeting regarding the R3A, I think the staff did a very good job of addressing our concerns. So I think it's ready to go forward to the Assembly. And hopefully will spur some really, really good mixed-use development in this town.
And anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Ms. Bailey, go ahead.
I think this is getting at an area that our community's been lacking. We definitely need mixed-use development. My one concern is that maybe it doesn't go far enough. As I mentioned in a previous meeting, I wish it impacted our greenbelt areas more as a way to decrease the amount of driving we have. And I do agree that it's going to be harder to get into those zoning areas where it becomes cost efficient, and so it's really going to encourage those developers to go out and build those. However, when introducing a new zoning area, I think being cautious isn't the worst way to go about it. So if my main concern is that maybe we won't be getting as much mixed use as we would, it's still an improvement. And so for that, I think it's well thought out, and I hope that this is a first step and that there will be further research on where we can pursue this in other areas, and maybe down the line if it needs to be amended to make it more expansive.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Anyone else? I'm also going to support the motion. We extended the public hearing. We had an opportunity for the public to comment after we received notification from a couple of community councils that they didn't have enough time. I think in the end, it sounds like the lack of understanding of where these could be was really what was creating the anxiety, and I think the map of some really only a handful areas around the bowl of where this could be initially applied. I want to also state that it recommends horizontal mixed use, which I think is a more viable alternative for Anchorage than vertical mixed use, and that's a good thing. I think I would also state that feasibility matters, and you can calibrate all day related to zoning, but I encourage you, when you have petitioners and developers moving forward, to try to understand where they're running into roadblocks, and they will. And I would maintain that if you don't have a project moving forward to be permitted, 6-8 months from now and for the 2018 building season, and likely doesn't look like someone's coming the following year, then at that point it's time to reevaluate and say, what are there changes that could be made based on the feedback and communication that you're having to encourage some investment in these areas. So thanks for your work, everybody, and with that, I'll ask the commission to vote. The ordinance passes. can I get a motion to adjourn unless there's any other items? Oh, Hal, go ahead. By the way, we got to replace Mr. Walker, whoever's making that motion to adjourn, now that he's no longer here. So, go ahead, Mr. Hart.
Yes, in the second week of December, I've been working with DCI Engineering. I think it's Rogson, Paul. I want to say Paul Rogson of DCI Engineering. He wants to provide an overview of how we might be able to get to 6 stories more efficiently and with less cost. And there are some systems that their company had developed working with a variety of developers in the Seattle area. They want to talk about that, lowering labor costs as well as lowering construction costs in the process. And so there's just a lunch and learn opportunity, and we'll be holding it at our office that's second Thursday of December. And we'll create a handout that'll come out to you as a reminder.
I assume Mr. Schutte will make sure the structural reviewers with the municipality attend that work session.
Yes, he's giving, yes, and I will too. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Bailey.
I just want to check, we haven't received our packet for next week yet, have we? Okay.
Through the chair, Ms. Bailey, your packet will be sent out tomorrow. Yeah, my apologies.
All right, who's up for that motion? Ms. Up? Oh, she beat you. Ms. Bailey has a motion to adjourn. Is there any objection? This meeting is adjourned.